Welcome to Addicted to Watches. Today, we're going to be looking at what might just be one of the most popular JDM Seiko watches inside Japan. This is the SAGZ083 and comes from their Brights line of watches, which generally feature quartz movements and are described as for global-oriented business people. So, you can see right away that the classic Seiko design language in this watch is one that will work well in a business setting, but also in a casual one too. There are one or two things holding this watch back from being a perfect everyday watch, but it still makes a compelling argument. The official retail price of this watch, according to Seiko, is 71,500 yen. However, if you are buying in person in Japan, it can be had for much less than that. Large electronics retailers, such as Big Camera and Yodobashi, both sell this watch for 50,000 yen, which is about $487. Joining their points programs will also get you 10% back in store credit, effectively reducing the price of this watch to just under $430. If buying online, Amazon has this watch currently listed for $609, but it can also be purchased from Sakura Watches for $415 plus postage. All prices are current as of the time of recording, but they do fluctuate. I purchased this watch 2 years ago from Big Camera, and when I was purchasing it, it was labelled as the #1 bestseller in the range of Seiko watches they had. But this watch hasn't achieved any popularity outside of Japan. Is it because it features a seemingly basic quartz movement, or is there another reason? Let's have a closer look and find out. Getting into the specifications of this watch, it features a 39mm case size and a thickness of just 8.8mm, making it a great size for a range of wrists and allows it to easily slip under a cuff. The short lug-to-lug of this watch also contributes to its wearability, coming in at just 43mm on the case. However, those male end links increase it to a still manageable 46mm. While this watch has a stated lug width of 20mm, you won't be changing out the strap anytime soon, because, as you can see right here, what would be the end links of the bracelet are actually just part of the case. The weight of this watch may surprise you, however, coming in at just 76 grams. This is because this watch features a titanium case and bracelet, making it virtually disappear when on the wrist. An unsigned screw-down crown and press-on case back give this watch 100 meters of water resistance, adding to its practicality as an everyday watch. You may have also seen a pop of anti-reflective coating on the underside of the crystal protecting the dial. Thankfully, this crystal is a sapphire crystal rather than Seiko's proprietary hardlex. This watch features a quartz movement, as you can see from the ticking second hand. However, in particular, it is the caliber 7B24, which is the solar movement utilizing radio wave technology. This means that the watch can sync via radio waves with an atomic clock and will always be incredibly accurate. For those living in Japan, China, or the US, you will be able to receive these signals, but anyone living in other countries won't, unfortunately. When not receiving the radio signal, this movement is stated to be accurate within 15 seconds plus or minus per month, so fairly standard for a quartz movement. Being solar, this watch has a battery that is charged by light and will run for 6 months when fully charged, or 1.5 years in power-saving mode. We'll take a closer look at the case finishing now, but as you can see, there is very little recoil on the ticks of the second hand, and it is hitting the minute markers very nicely. Moving on, if we have a look at the case and bracelet finishing, we see that this watch has a very nice high-polished bezel, and while not the Zaratsu polishing seen on Grand Seiko watches, it is still very well done. The top and sides of the case feature a brushed finish with a high-polished chamfered edge to add some visual interest down the side of the case. The bracelet is almost entirely brush, with just these high-polished sections to each link on the inner portion. These catch the light nicely when on wrist without being overpowering. The clasp is in a brushed finish with high polish on the sides and has 2 positions of micro-adjustment. You can also see that the Seiko logo is nicely branded on here. The clasp itself is milled and, just like the rest of the bracelet, fully titanium. When sizing the bracelet, just be aware that it uses the pin and collar system, so don't lose those little collars. Looking at the dial now, this is what I think is the star of the show. This watch has a very nice looking vertical plank style dial. This is reminiscent of the old Omega Aquaterra before it changed to horizontal planks. While this dial is labelled as black, thanks to the solar cell underneath, when the light catches the dial, it can shift from black to a deep purple and even a vibrant purple-blue in direct sunlight. The hands of this watch are Dauphine hands, with one side polished and one side brushed, which makes these hands much more legible than when both sides are polished. I've noticed this being done on some of the newer Presage models too, and it makes a huge difference. All indices are applied, multifaceted batons, with brushed tops and high-polished sides, which really play with the light nicely. This watch also features a date complication, which is neatly framed within a thin silver border, and we can see that Seiko has color-matched the date wheel. The Seiko logo is printed rather than applied, as is the text on the lower half of the dial. Surrounding the dial is a raised chapter ring with minute indices as well as some letters used in combination with the movement to set the time and show the signal strength of the radio waves. Now that all of that is out of the way, let's get this on wrist and see how it looks. My wrist, for your reference, is a bit over 6.5 inches, and as you can see, this fits very nicely. The slim profile of the case means that it lays on my wrist nicely. You also get some very nice reflections of that polished bezel, hands and hour markers as it catches the light, not to mention that dial too. Now you can also see as I turn my wrist that those polished inner parts of the links become visible and add a little bit of flair to the bracelet as it curves around the wrist. Having covered the watch now, I mentioned that there were a couple of things that stopped this watch from being the perfect everyday wear. Whilst it is light, solidly constructed, a great size, and features a design that fits well in most situations, a couple of things let it down. First is the loom, or the lack of loom. This watch doesn't have any loom whatsoever, meaning reading the time on this watch after dark becomes much more difficult. Another issue is the end links of this watch. It doesn't have any. So for people who prefer other straps over bracelets, or just people who like to change up the look of their watch with a variety of stretch, you can't do that with this watch. I didn't initially realize this when looking at the watch, and was a bit disappointed to find that out. The final thing about this watch that is a little disappointing really depends where you live, and that is the radio wave part of the movement. Whilst it's not a big complaint, as the watch is still a very accurate quartz movement, for some people, not being able to make use of this function could be a negative. Overall, considering those three negatives, I still really like this watch, and wear it pretty often, as it's a great grab-and-go piece. I never have to worry about setting the time or changing the battery, and being someone who prefers bracelets, the lack of changeability doesn't worry me too much. The Seiko JDM catalogue has a lot of hidden gems like this watch that don't get the same popularity that some of their more prolific automatic brothers do. But this one has clearly found its place in the domestic Japanese market, selling very well locally. But what do you think? Is this a watch you would wear? Do you already have this watch? Can you get past the lack of loom and strap options? Thanks for watching. I'll see you soon.